A few hours ago, the Malawi police blocked the entry to the parliament building, denying the opposition MPs entry into the parliament house. A leading newspaper in the country described the situation in Malawi's parliament on its first page as the house of anarchy. If we just look a little under the surface of this event, a picture emerges to show that Malawi is a country bogged down by endless court injunctions. What is happening in Malawi's parliament is a microcosm of what is happening in the whole country. It is fair to say that Malawi is heading to a grinding halt because of a litany and an endless list of court injunctions which are pretty much dominant and affecting every aspect of the country's society, men, women, and children. So that as we speak, there is political chaos. Unfortunately, the chaos is in parliament, which is failing to conduct its business due to these court injunctions. So much so that there is no clear leader of opposition in the parliament, and it is a situation being driven by the judiciary. There are now genuine fears that the actions of the Malawian legal system are leading the country into a dangerous path. It is not impossible to imagine that if Malawi does not curtail this anarchy that is happening in Malawi's parliament, it could as well spill in the streets of Malawi. Because after years of endless court injunctions and interventions, Malawians are confused by the way judiciary operates or its role in the Malawian society. No legal explanation at the moment can pass the eye test. Maybe if the economy of Malawi could sustain these massive costs imposed on the people of Malawi as the result of the court litigation, maybe there could be some justification. After all, the court does not make any money. It is supported by taxpayers' money. Unfortunately, Malawi is one of the poorest nations on earth, where people are mightily struggling to put food on the table. But such has been the judiciary domination of the country, so that Malawi became a good example for the world, certainly the exception in Africa when in 2019 the court overturned the 29 presidential general election and ruled it to have been null and void due to irregularities, and changed the law in the process, which now requires the presidential candidate winner to attain at least 50% of the vote to become president instead of the previous first past the post wins.
Decision. 5 Constitutional Court judges nullify May's presidential election result, saying Peter Mutharika did not win a second term. Fresh elections have to be held within 150 days. Opposition leaders who were caught welcomed the ruling.
We're happy with the judgment. Justice has prevailed. And we shall make further comments after reading the final judgment. Thank you.
We came to seek justice, we just got it.
The then President Peter Mutharika and his party, the Democratic Progressive Party, were forced to a re-election which took place the next year in 2020. The president lost the election to the current president, Malawi Congress Party's Lazarus Chakwera. At the time, Malawi was hailed as the beacon of hope, the bastion of democracy in Africa, the reference point. But this was also the time the judiciary established its dominance in Malawi. They had slayed the dragon. It is not an exaggeration to say that the judiciary now dominates the legislative, the executive branches of government, in other words, the presidency and the parliament. Indeed, Malawi, since emerging from one-party rule in 1994 after decades of Kamuzu Banda's dictatorship where the presidency dominated the country, Malawi has been a very successful democratic progressive country with multiple changes of leadership from different political parties after conducting several relatively peaceful elections. Almost like a child in a democracy candy shop, really, isn't it? But unfortunately, by far, the economy has not followed suit. In fact, the country has retrogressed economically. Since the dawn of democracy in 1994, there is no social mobility of note. The majority are poorer than ever. There is a population explosion with no plan for sustainability. Malawi has seen some of the worst corruption by its politicians in power. There has been food and fuel shortages, world events such as the COVID-19, climate change, and major conflicts elsewhere in the world have hit the country hard. Mind you, I'm not pointing the finger at the present government, but rather all democratically elected governments since the dawn of democracy in 1994. With democracy came in an independent judiciary. For the first time, Malawian citizens learned that they do have recourse against each other and the government, or whoever they want, really. The legal profession flourished. Law became one of the most sought after professions as lawyers started to make headlines and visibly made a lot of money driving fancy cars. By early 2000s, Malawians became familiar with the legal term injunction. Unfortunately, this word would dominate their lives forever. So injunction is described as a judicial order restraining a person from beginning or continuing an act. So by 2018, endless court injunctions were the order of the day in the southeastern country of Africa. So bad, so that in that year, 2018, the Minister of Justice at the time, Samuel Tembenu, bemoaned the situation, and he said, "One tends to wonder, when the government is constructing a school block, then someone gets a court order stopping the whole process. Is this injunction really serving its general purpose? This is costing the government heavily." This seems to be the understatement of the year. The government is the largest employer through the civil service. To put things into context, the Ministry of Finance recently released a report that indicates that up to 91% of the working population is unemployed. Therefore, 9% of this cohort supports the entire nation of roughly 20 million people or more. With the government then being the largest employer by far, the government finds itself in a situation where they are unable to fire corrupt or underperforming individuals due to the fear of litigation. You see, just to backtrack a little bit, with these bigger economies or big economies, mostly the economy happens in the private sector, not the government, and the biggest employer is the private sector. While in Malawi, it's the opposite. We have a very small private sector and a large civil service. Now, let's get back to where I was. Now, the government finds itself in a situation where they are unable to fire corrupt or underperforming individuals due to the fear of litigation, for sure. Once an individual gets fired, they run to the courts for a court injunction followed by a large payout. The government is constantly paying out huge sums to individuals so that the much needed taxpayers' money is wasted. The government has resorted to transferring its underperforming employees to other departments, resulting in the civil service that continues to underperform and underdeliver. There are various examples where the court has the government's hands tied. Recently, for instance, in the city of Lilongwe, a court injunction was granted to stop the government from vacating people who are encroaching and building in and surrounding boundaries of a cemetery. And they have continued to build because the court says, yes, you can go on. The government fails to relocate street vendors, for instance, to a market as they are running battles between the street vendors and the city council due to a court injunction to stop the relocation. In 2017, the Vice President of Malawi, Salos Chilima, ordered the Blantyre City Council to vacate a court injunction that was obtained by Malawians encroaching the Sochi mountain, as it is a flood-prone area and people were in danger of injury and death in case of frauds. He said at the time, this is 2017, "What I'm saying here is that all people who encroached into Sochi mountain should be relocated with immediate effect. But what I hear is that people got injunction against the decision, and now it is 5 years down the line. This place is a death trap, and people need to be moved out to avoid loss of lives due to floods. When we lose lives due to national calamities, no one can go to court to get injunction against the dead," observed the Vice President. Unfortunately, the City Council were unable to vacate the court injunction on March 2023 last year. Mudslides and floods caused by Cyclone Freddy washed away and buried tens of people at the very same site and hundreds of others in other flood-prone areas in the country. As we speak, the government is still failing to relocate the people in the same areas as they are court injunctions. Court injunctions are also rampant in sports. Now back to the current situation in Parliament. The main opposition party In Malawi, the DPP, they have never-ending battle of leadership that are primarily fought in Malawian courts. They are factions, one led by MP Kondwani Nkrumah, the other led by former President Mutharika. Currently, the leadership of the DPP is failing to expel some prominent members, such as Mr. Nkrumah, from the party for misconduct, as there are injunctions against this. This has led to chaos both in and outside the Parliament of Malawi. The problem is the judiciary is interfering with the political procedures of the opposition party by giving complainants hearings, injunctions, and counter-injunctions. Hence, the never-ending cycle of judicial ineffective interventions. There are hundreds of injunctions that we can cite here, but it will take us hours to cover them all. So where does the judiciary draw the line? The late president of Malawi, Bingu Mutharika, in 2011 condemned some judges for issuing injunctions which he said was impeding development of the country. His solution was to raise fees of obtaining a court injunction by 41,666% as a deterrent. But the Malawi Court Society and other private lawyers at the time obtained a court injunction to stop the implementation of the new injunction fees. So the situation in Malawi paints a clear picture. That is, the democratic and judicial gains have by far outpaced economic gains. Malawi is in need of economic gains, but these are being hampered by the overly powerful but a messy and uncoordinated judicial system which is holding Malawians to ransom. The judicial system needs to be reviewed and put in its place so that it can best serve the country. What works in the Western countries will not necessarily work in Africa. It is clear that the Malawi judicial system needs to be stopped before it leads the country into the abyss. Thank you for watching, and please leave your comment below, and do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.